From 1970 until 1974, Jon Pertwee was the Doctor. After spending 20 years doing funny voices on radio, he asked his agent to call up about the role of the Third Doctor on a whim, only to find out that he was already on the shortlist for the role. For the next 5 years he played the Time Lord as a gadget-loving dandy, resurrecting the show's popularity to heights it hadn't seen since the days of Dalek Mania. Jon Pertwee died on the 20th of May 1996. A few weeks earlier he recalled his years on the show in an exclusive interview for SFX CD, which we've reproduced here. How did you come to play the role of the Doctor in the first place?
Well, now, in the Navy, like a man called Daniel Evans, who played Tuffy Goldstein, he played starboard lookout speaking. He said to me one day, "Why don't you put yourself up for Doctor Who? Pat Troughton's leaving." And I said, "Well, I didn't know that, but they wouldn't want me. I was sort of eccentric character actor. Why would they want me?" And they said, "I don't know, I think it'd be a rather good idea." So I rang my agent and I said, "Look, what about putting me up for Doctor Who?" And there was a terrible pause on the other end of the phone. And I said, yes, I quite understand. Don't worry about it. Forget it. It's probably a stupid idea." He said, "Yes, I think it's a dreadful idea, but I'll ring up and try." And he rang up the producer, Derek Sherwin, and he said, "I've got a suggestion to play Doctor Who." And he said, "Who's that?" And he said, "Jon Pertwee." And there was this terrible pause again from the producer. And my agent, Richard Stone, said, "Yes, I quite agree. I had the same reaction." And they said, "No, you've got it completely wrong. We're gobsmacked up at this end." He said, "Why?" He said, "Well, Jon Pertwee's name is number 2 on our short list and has been for 11 months. And I never knew it at all. So I was rung up by Sean Sutton, who was the head of programs. He was an old mate of mine, and we were in the Navy together. They saved my life in the Navy, actually. He pulled me into a passage when the bomb was dropping. It was making a very funny noise. I put my head outside, and it was a landmine dropping on a parachute. And he grabbed me by the back of the neck, and he hauled me up this passage, and the bomb went off. And if he hadn't hauled me back, I think I'd have copped it. Anyway, he offered me the part of Doctor Who, and I said, "Well, can we talk about it?" And he said, "Yes, let's have a bite of lunch." And we had lunch, and they said, "You want to do Doctor Who?" And I said, "Let me think about it." And he said, "Right." And he rang up the end of the week, said, "You want to do Doctor Who?" I said, "Can we have a lunch?" And he said, "We've had lunch." I said, "Can we have another one?" And he said, "Yes, all right, we'll have another one." So at the end of the lunch, he said, "Do you want to do Doctor Who?" And I said, "Can I think about it?" He said, "Well, you've been thinking about it." I said, "I know, but it's a very big decision." So I rang him up halfway through the week and said, "Do you do dinners?"
Did you have much control over how the Doctor's character developed?
It sounds as if I had a lot of control. Well, the answer is I had absolutely none. The reason why you don't have any control of what you're doing is because you were given you say, for example, you've been rehearsing for a week, and you then do the recording at the weekend, and then you have a day off, if you're lucky, and you're given a script for the next one. So it'll be a Sunday, so you get the script and you read it. Now you go along to the first rehearsal of that show on the Monday. Now remember that the producer has allocated a director months and months before, because he had to direct the thing, he had to arrange all the costumes, get his costume designers, his lighting engineers, his special effects, his casting, all had to be done all ready for that Monday, which was the next day as far as we were concerned. So the only input that I could have, or any of the doctors could have, would be on the read-through on the Monday, where the writers would usually be present. You'd say, "No, that doesn't suit me, I don't like that, and I think it would be better if we took that there and put that there." And if the director agreed, and the writers said that's possible, they would then rewrite that. And that was the end. You'd have no more to say, because the rest of the week, it was really taut and tight rehearsal period and time, and it had to be right. And, of course, there was no, people often said, "Oh, did you ad-lib?" Well, no, of course not. Ad-libbing would be out of the question on television.
Did you play the Doctor deliberately differently from the way he was portrayed by Patrick Troughton, your predecessor?
My attitude was that it was sort of science fiction James Bond attitude, really. And one most important thing of all is playing it straight down the middle, because it's no good being a folk hero figure if the kids and the followers aren't sure that the Doctor's going to go through and get it sorted out. You can't prevaricate by sitting on your bottom and playing a penny whistle, in my opinion. Much as I love Pat Troughton, and I thought his Doctor Who was wonderful, but I didn't agree with that attitude. But I mean, his was different from his predecessor, who was this sort of irascible professor, and mine was the sort of cerebral dandy.
What was the role of the Doctor's companions, other than needing the Doctor's help all the time?
You see, after all, the companions are translators to the public. You know, the Doctor says something scientific gobbledygook and says the dihedral plast of the formthing must be mixed with on the something, you see. And so she says, "I'm sorry, Doctor, but I don't understand." And he says, "Well, what it really means, Joe, is this, you see." And then you explain it, and then so that the public who are listening don't feel too stupid that they didn't understand what the Doctor was talking about. That was the idea of the companion, really. So, metaphorically, should be the lady that is strapped to the railway line and says, "Help, Doctor, help," and the Doctor rushes forward and grabs her from under the wheels. And so one really sort of needed the little helpless, and that's why Joe Grant, Katie Manning and Liz Sladen were sort of smaller in stature, and I looked protective with my cloak, the mother hen's wings, round the little children.
What did you think of the Daleks?
I didn't like the Daleks, because I've said this many times before, because you only had to go down 2 flights of stairs, and you had them, really. Although now I'm told they can float downstairs. They've got sort of hovercraft engines in them. But with the sink pump and the egg whisk and the tennis ball stuck all over them, it didn't seem very frightening to me, although the kids and the public loved them.
Why do you think so many adults watched Doctor Who when initially it was aimed at a younger audience?
The reason, I think, is because it's escapist. I think people at that time were sick of the kitchen sink. They wanted something more glamorous. For some strange reason, science fiction attracts fandom like nothing else. There are science fiction conferences all over the world. I go all over the English-speaking world to Doctor Who conferences. Not so much now, because America are not playing it any longer, really. But at one time they did. And they play science fiction series that have been defunct for 25 and 30 years, and they still hang on to them because science fiction does attract fans in an extraordinary way. You would have conventions of science fiction, whereas you'd never have conventions of Wurzel Gummidge. No matter how popular it was.
Why do you think Doctor Who has enjoyed such long-term appeal?
Because it's been playing almost continuously. The videos are enormously big sellers. Now we've helped it move it along even more with doing it on radio. But I say eventually it had to come to an end.
Why did you leave the show?
The reason I left, because I did 5 years, and I thought that was plenty, and I didn't want to bury myself forever in it. I wanted to do other things. Mark Ewing had a lot to do with the fact that the team broke up. Barry Letts was leaving. Terence Dix, the editor, he was leaving. And there was the whole break-up of team, and of course I lost my great friend Roger Delgado, who played the Master. He'd been killed in a motor accident. And so I thought it was the end of an era and it was time to go.
Do you mind that you've been typecast as Doctor Who?
Yes, I cared desperately and still do. It's an infuriating thing that I go up for somebody. For example, I was in my agent's office not that long ago, and somebody was on the phone to her and said, "I want an extremely old general who's an alcoholic, who's got gout and had been in the Indian Army." And I heard this and I said, "Me, I couldn't think of anything nicer than an Indian Army colonel with gout, 90 years old. Great, marvellous character role, cameo." So I said, "Me, I'd like to do that." And she said, "Well, I've got somebody sitting here now who would love to do it." And she said, "Who is it, Jon Pertwee?" She said, "Oh, she's a bit ridiculous."
You've now done 2 Doctor Who radio series. How does the visual nature of Doctor Who translate to radio?
Well, it's very easy, really, because it entirely depends on people's imagination. I much prefer radio as a medium, really, to anything else, because you can do what you like on radio. You can go where you like. And for special effects, of course, it's superb, because 50 pence on television, which could cost you thousands of pounds. So, in the main, you've got much greater freedom on radio than you have on television or film.
Do you think the radio series is attracting a new audience? Or is it the same old Doctor Who fans who've been watching the show for years?
Yes, people are very used to listening to me on radio, and therefore I think I've brought a number of people with me, as it were, to listen. And, of course, all the Whovians, all the fans, listen automatically, like they buy the tapes automatically. If there's a new video comes out, the shopkeepers pretty well know to a cassette how many they're going to sell. It's extraordinary.